Ready? So as part of my thing, I wanted to share a segment of my mom talking to me, which we were just kicking it in the car one day. I was walking out of my house and she happened to be walking down the block behind me, and I've been wanting to record her more just for this reason I was saying earlier, just to get to, hear her voice. Actually, thank y'all so much. Sorry, I just looked at your eyes and just really appreciated what you shared. And Valerie, too. Thank y'all for sharing this with me. Thank y'all. Yes. Oh, yes. And the book, How to Write an Earthquake, which both of them are featured in. Boop. Um, so, yeah, that's all the setup I'm going to give. You could just play it. All right, so you're saying this book about depression?
Yeah, so it don't prescribe to like drugs. It prescribe to like using like herbal stuff and and being and making sure that your body has the nutrition that it's need, because I say like a lot of people, they are malnutrition, and of course they're going to be depressed, and then the medical industry going to give us medication. But I say it's like honor it, ask it, what it is that you need to know, you know so yes, it was just like because I say like and I've been embarrassed about about depression, and this say it comes from like stuffing stuff, not being true to yourself, and but it brings a lot of gifts if you would like take the time and even ask it. It's like what it is you need to be doing, what it is you need to be learning, you know. So yeah, so and I think I went, I read right through it,
Wow.
yeah. So and I took it with me, and again, being embarrassed, I cover it with newspapers, the cover, so nobody would see, what I'm reading, but it's like so interesting. So this is the first time I get like, a positive take on it. In the past, it's something to be like ashamed of. Maybe you're weak, but no, it's like, the universe, life is telling you to like, slow down, and address certain things, feelings. So yes, I want for you to read it, because I've told you like in the past. I don't know if you remember. I see, I feel like something is that there's a block that I just feel where I'm blocked, and they talk about that, and then I got this book too that talk about tears, how important it is to cry, um, and how it releases different like blocks and stuff in your life, and it's just recently I've been able to like truly cry, you know. Um,
All right, Josh.
this book, they had like a whole chapter on crying, and I remember like my friend Jane, she when I was like
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, a lot of my writing is inspired by me and my mom's conversations. And this piece I'm sharing is about my mom. I don't know if you would call it a midlife crisis. I almost would call it a midlife crisis. Decided to move us to Florida all of a sudden when I was a high schooler. So here we go. The first time I met the ocean, I was 16. My mother had moved my two sisters and I from Minnesota to Florida. I was not happy about the move. I had a lot that I felt I was leaving. Friends mostly, and I liked my high school. I liked my life. Months prior to the actual move, while we were preparing our home to be sold, and I was crying over her moving us so far away, my mother, in a very clear and certain voice, looked me deep into my eyes and said, with an airy desperation, if I do not leave here, I will die. In my heart, I knew my mother was near some sort of break. I have always been tuned into my mom. She's a woman whose tears I know the smell of and would have the aroma meet me when I came home from school some days. I was feeling her sadness in my limbs and in my gut. Born in Trinidad, my mom's skin is obsidian, and she wears her hair shaved low like a warrior, and carries a wrist of silver bangles from her island country, whose jingling sound we would use to locate her throughout the world. She had 4 daughters and was raising them in the coldest, most whitest of places. She and our father had moved up here together and divorced when he had my younger brother and sister with a white lady from Wisconsin. This broke something deep. My mom was the center of our world, and her world was crumbling, and I was feeling it. At the time, she was working at a hotel as a cook. She would have to be at work by 6 a.m., so she would be awake at 4 a.m., make coffee, and get herself ready. I remember vividly mornings in the dead of winter. Minnesotan winters feel like everything is underground and captive to the debris of soul callings. The mornings would be so dark and still. I remember awakening in the early darkness, hearing her stir in this unlikely world, first hearing her bracelets while she bathed, and smelling her coffee brewing. She would then go outside to heat up the car, to prepare it 20 minutes before her actual departure. Eventually, she taught me how to turn on the car, and it would be my job to heat it up for her. She would then drive to the hotel where she would go into a windowless kitchen dungeon and make food for hundreds of hotel guests, and I would get my 2 younger sisters and I ready for school. She hated it. Around this time, my mom had visited a friend of hers in Florida to escape for a spell. Upon returning, she announced that my sisters, her and I would be moving to Florida. When a real estate agent showed up a week later, I realized she wasn't talking shit. We were moving to Florida. I was devastated. Initially, she did try to entice us, showing us pictures of the beach, reminding us that we would not have to deal with the snow, but it was pretty clear that we were moving whether we were convinced or not. I remember I noticed the air first. It was hot, sweet, and wet. I had flown down in December, 2 months after my mom and 2 younger sisters, Ainaje and Onika, had come down. I was in a program for high school students to take college courses at the University of Minnesota, and I begged my mom to let me finish the semester, and she agreed. And I stayed and lived with my older sister, Leslie. The drive from the airport to our new home was lush and alive in comparison to the snow and ice of the home I had just left. We were renting a condominium with a man-made lake in the back. The condo also had huge windows and tile floors. There were little lizards running around outside. Our neighbors had orange, lime, grapefruit, and avocados trees, which was like magical, actually, to see these foods in their habitat and not at the grocery store. This new place was our home. This was our new life. The next morning, I woke up and felt different in the brightness and warmth of my new Florida life. I was not used to the air and incessant sunshine of this place. I still felt like a visitor. I realized I had been awakened by the familiar smell of my mother's coffee brewing and the clang of her bangles. I found her on the back patio looking at the lake quietly and with a serenity seemingly untethered to this planet. I was instantly soothed by the sight. She smiled at me and invited me to sit with her. She did not have to start working right away since she had some money from the sale of the house for us to live on for a while as we got situated. I sat in the chair next to her and was happy to be in her silence. After a moment, she turned and smiled to me. "Today," she said joyfully, "we're going to the beach." Seeing the ocean for the first time to me was like the miracle of my existence. A goddess. I felt her presence before I saw her, and when I saw her, I knew she was alive. I grew up in the land of 10,000 lakes, and as a small child, I would refer to them individually as the ocean, since that was the body of water I often heard my parents recount. They would chuckle and correct me and say, "No, that is not the ocean." Right, the ocean is the ocean, and when I stood in front of it, I was shy. She was beautiful, loud, and when I stood in front of it, she was beautiful, loud, and welcoming like a long-lost Caribbean aunt. She would come close to touch me and then recede back into herself to get a good look at me and then lunge at me to embrace me. She was so clear that when I swam in her, I had my eyes open like I saw people do on TV, and like I did when oh gosh, this is so hard to talk it out loud. And like I did when I swam in lakes. Burning my eyes and tasting the salt, I learned that this is the origin of the mineral of life. I was 16 and felt like a child having to learn water again. A water that could move and steal you and bring you back and leave you shells as gifts and keep secrets. Because I did not have to go to school right away, I began staying up until 6 a.m., indulging in my own dreaminess and ponderings, reading copious amounts of library books, writing emotional tortured poems and stories, as well as letters to my friends. In the letters, I described Florida as a paradise where I was becoming spiritually enlightened and more attractive, where there are dope-ass boys who are cute as well as exotically hailing from Cuba, Peru, and Jamaica. I wanted my friends to be jealous and convince myself that this uprooting was benefiting me in some way. Eventually, my mother found a job cooking for another hotel and was paid even less and hated it more. I was finally enrolled into Hollywood Hills High School, which sounds kind of luxurious, but it was really typical. It also had some classes in trailers, which is strange. My sister Anika had already started classes there and was underwhelmed, antisocial, yet trying to make her way. She found herself in detention frequently for arriving late to class, which was a punishment that we had never experienced in Minneapolis public schools. In those days, we both wore skater grunge clothing and listened to alternative music. I had also began wrapping my head in bright African fabric like Erykah Badu, which my wild and unruly best friend from Kenya taught me to do the previous summer when I started growing my hair natural. I had to lie to the teachers at Hollywood Hills and said it had something to do with my religion, so it wouldn't be conflated into a perceived gang symbol and therefore inappropriate school attire. What gang would I be repping from Minneapolis with such gusto in a new territory? I realized high schools anywhere are arbitrarily repressive and idiotic. We were Minnesotan West Indians in Florida. We stood out. We did start to make friends. Onika was befriended by a lesbian goth white girl who was persistently friendly and gave her someone to sit by during lunch, much to my loner sister's dismay. I became friends with the nerdy and emo poetry writing kids, a handsome and bi-curious Peruvian boy who I fell in love with, who loved my head wrap and my taste in music. One day during lunch, I introduced myself to another girl sitting alone under a tree. She was a Swiss foreign exchange student named Barbara, who was equally as awkward trying to fit into a new high school reality. We were quick friends who were both into poetry, curious about yoga, and bonded over having the same astrological sign, Cancer. I take credit for introducing her to the then new and exotic American beverage, the Frappuccino. Barbara's host family was trying to lure their teenage son out of homosexuality by having her be their exchange student and live with them for a year. She and him had to share a room and a bed to accomplish this mission. Fortunately for her, Todd was in fact irreversibly gay and a beautiful friend to her. One time, my mom let me drive with them to South Beach in Miami so we could have dinner at a place where Madonna ate at. Todd was a tall and chic 17-year-old who was grown in that way that I found impressive, dangerous, and compelling. I lived vicariously through his boldness. He dated older guys, dressed in designer clothes, and was unapologetically sexually active, in his own way transcending the small-mindedness of our high school. Todd embraced me when Barbara and I befriended each other and also loved my head wraps, telling me he was a huge Erykah Badu fan. That day, however, his demeanor was jilted when my don't give a fuck and stern Trinidadian mom delivered me to his car, startling the cigarette out of his hand as she made him promise sincerely to bring me back safe. It was Todd's idea to escape us from our corny South Florida suburb into a Miami that was worthy of our inner glamour and specialness. The kind that is invisible when you're an outsider in high school. We listened to Bjork the whole time, and I smelled the humidity and the ocean, watching the lights of Miami cascade the night, and I was completely absorbed in the free feeling of being young and doing something grown. Barbara covered the bill with her Swiss dispensed allowance, also Todd's idea, and after we took pictures of ourselves with South Beach's opulence as our backdrop. Life for my mom and my sisters and I were crystallizing in Florida. The academics of the school were mediocre, our grades were excellent, and we had friends. On weekends, our mom would take us to the beach to be with the ocean, the goddess. My mom would grill vegetables and fry chicken and make potato salad and buy orange soda and pack it up. We would drive to the beach and eat the food and lay by the water and pose for pictures and collect shells and look at people and look at cruise ships and tease one another and be too shy to swim and read books quietly and think of Minneapolis and not think of Minneapolis and decide to walk into the water to our ankles and then swim and smile and wait for the sun to set and look at the stars and pack it all up and take it home. The salt and sand following us into the house. Our dad came to visit us once while we were there and had settled somewhat. My mother, let me say that right. Our dad came to visit us while we were there and had settled somewhat. My mother, sisters, and I treated him like a king out of habit and customary to our West Indianness. I had, however, made room in my heart to resent him with a burn of indignant adolescence. I was mad that he was being allowed in our Florida world after he betrayed my mom and us. I loved him too, though. I missed him bad, and he was a part of our universe that we had left behind, and having him there for those days felt exciting, claustrophobic, and confusing. We lived in Florida for less than a year before my mother decided to move us back to Minneapolis. My sisters and I were devastated by this. Florida had become home to us, and we did not want to leave it. My mother was starting to feel the pressure of providing for us on child support and a minimum wage paycheck. She was with us alone, and that was becoming harder. Although she had found the need to escape Minneapolis, it was our home. She had known it longer than her birthplace at Trinidad. She had started to feel guilty that we did not have anyone but her down there, not our father or her family, just us and her and our tropical getaway away from it all. My mother and I have talked about the experience of Florida years later. She shared with me how much hurt she would feel being in a grocery store and suddenly see the woman walking around with children fathered by her husband. Then to have to wake up in darkness, work all day, and then return into the darkness. She was a tropical fish in a frozen lake. I think initially when we moved back, there was a feeling of defeat. While she got back on her feet, looking for work and a place for us to live, she slept on her sisters' and friends' couches while we had to live with our father, whose house I was literally allergic to, it being always in a state of disrepair. We were back in Minneapolis, homeless, independent castaways of our own grandiose adventure. The whole experience had taught me a lot. To know when to escape in order to save yourself. The tender piece of you that belongs to you and only you. It was like an extended vacation where you got to reinvent yourself and be free from outdated pain. My mother got to be a beach-dwelling shell collecting queen for a couple months. We got to be the new kids and bask in the sunshine and have our mother's undivided attention in a way we never experienced before. We got to meet the ocean and fall in love.